On March 18th of this year, so 2025, NFL analyst Rich Schreiber of Sharp Football Analysis shared a pretty interesting table to Twitter. A table that displayed every NFL team's most used offensive line combination, so any five-man combo of starters and bench guys from their team, and the percentage of total offensive snaps by the team on the season that line combination was on the field together for. And the results, they were pretty cool. They showed a pretty clear correlation because of the 11 teams that strung together the same offensive line combo for 50% of their snaps on the season or more, 10 of them made the playoffs. Sorry to the Falcons. And of the remaining 21 teams, all teams who struggled to find one consistent combo for more than half of their snaps, well, three made the playoffs: the Vikings, the Rams, and the Commanders. The other 18 did not. Now, this is interesting and moderately telling, right? A great reminder in a season dominated by low possession per game football and run heavy offenses that success at offensive line is helpful. And as pointed out by Rich in the comments, this trend, it's got some additional merit to it too. It's been a fairly consistent football theme for a number of years. This is great. Another easy way to virtue signal your way into ball knower perception, shouting, "There you have it, folks. The trenches matter. Invest in your offensive line, boys." As if the Eagles haven't already told us that loud enough. It's a fun stat, but maybe not one that makes anyone's head explode. That's my point. And I mean, we've got other stats like this too. Take Bill Barnwell's draft capital chart, or Daniel Griffiths and his injury chart. Both of these are helpful reminders that bad things, like having good draft position and having lots of injuries, well, they're bad. And that good things, playing well enough in a season to pick late, staying healthy all season, they're good. Unless, again, you're the Atlanta Falcons in both of these instances, somehow. I don't know what's going on there. In both cases here, I know that there is nuance to these charts, but overall, I think they are cool, not revelatory. And I think that's where most other people would stand. Like I said, though, it is fun to look at these sorts of numbers and remind ourselves how simple this complex game can often be. How small, basic things like staying healthy, maximizing roster talent in a given window, things that we know to be important, they likely impact everybody even more than we'd like to admit. It is humbling to remember that, I will say that much. But I also think that there's more here. And I think that our initial chart, this multi-year trend, I think it provides me with an opportunity to make an argument that I've wanted to make for a long time. An argument that, by now, I'm somewhat convinced is completely irrefutable. And an argument then, for that reason, I'd like to challenge you to push back on, if you don't agree with the initial premise here. As I said previously, I think we all know how easy it is to virtue signal, so to speak, in a conversation about football by preaching the importance of solid offensive line play. It is a good practice, and there's nothing wrong with doing it. The big boys, they do deserve more love. But even in these virtue signal conversations, I still think that we all underrate this unit, even the best of us. Unless, that is, you are immediately accepting of the following statement without second thought. There is no one unit more important to winning a single football game than the offensive line. That is what I believe. Not the quarterback, not the defensive line, not the linebackers, not the offensive skill position players, not the defensive skill position players. Let's make this interesting. Not even the offensive and defensive coordinators. Nothing is more important to winning in football than your offensive line and offensive line coach. And I think it's not close. And I've got 5 reasons why. 5 statements, one for each lineman. Regardless of where you stand on my big initial claim, that is what this video is about. If you agree now, I'd love to hear your stance on these takes, and if you disagree, I would love to try and change your mind. That's the point of this video, and without further ado, let's get into this. Statement number 1. Perhaps the most pivotal statement to this video, and likely a more controversial statement than this video's premise. So buckle up. Offense is more important than defense. I've always kind of rejected the notion that offense and defense are equally important in the game of football. And I know that that sounds like an arrogant, casual, almost dopamine-oriented sort of take, but I'd actually argue that this is one of those bell curve things, that some things really are as simple as they seem, and that this is one of them. So I'll make this simple. I'll make this argument simple. The most important thing you can do in a football game is win. And the most important thing that you can do in attempt to win a football game is advance the football, conquer territory, and score points once there is no territory left to conquer. All of these things are done by the offense, the team with the football, barring a mistake made by the offense, a turnover. In turnovers, they're avoidable. There is no such thing as a predetermined bad play in the sport of football. Ask any defensive coordinator. The key to great defense is to hide where the available answers are on offense, because there are always going to be answers somewhere. You want to hide these and you want to stall their reveal. This is a game of spacing, and put simply, there is just more open field than there is occupied defensive space. Much like chess, football is a game of both action and reaction. One side's success is dictated by the other side's failures. And sure, failures can come when one is in either offensive or defensive mode, both things matter, but fundamentally, in both of these games, football and chess, nothing happens if not for the initiator. Every game is a series of chain reactions set off by the initial offender, the initial move maker. And in football, the team with the football makes that first move. To put this in a different, simple way, in a theoretical game between two perfect defenses, defenses that allow 0 successful plays by success rate and by expected points added, the team that loses the game will be the team that makes a mistake on offense or special teams, which is a form of offense, you're possessing the football right, first. A pick six, a fumble six, a safety, etc. In a theoretical game between two perfect offenses, though, using playoff format overtime, the game will never end. Not until, again, an offense makes a mistake. Because again, the game of football is won and lost by the action initiator, the team with the football. Two close to real examples of this in recent years, I'd say, were the 2018 Super Bowl and the 2023 AFC Championship game. In both instances, both teams played near perfect defense. In both games, though, it was the Rams and Ravens' offensive inabilities to provide a second action when the Patriots and Chiefs, respectively, shut down their first actions. For the Rams, that was their wide zone boot game. For the Ravens, shotgun passing, that lost them their games. Amazing defensive battles are still ultimately won and lost by who plays the better offensive game, who has fewer exploitable weaknesses. And in shootouts, which is the inverse here, amazing offensive games, the standard may be different, sure, but this remains the case. Whoever plays the better game on offense wins. It's kind of simple. It's bell curve. Like I said, most casual fans feel this intuitively, and that is not for no reason. And if you still disagree after all of that, have at it. I'll be interested to hear your perspective in the comments. I could add some long-winded, fancy paragraph here about why all of the league's offensive coordinators appear to be young, flashy hotshots, while the majority of the league's DCs appear to be old, grizzled war veterans. But honestly, I think that some of these images, they kind of just speak for themselves, and they fit right into this point. Again, before you hit send on that comment, though, I do not think that defense is unimportant. Defense wins championships. It's a saying for a reason. It is how you stand out in a league of offensive excellence. I just think that offensive performance is more important, more influential on a game's outcome. I think that this performance by offense is primarily decided by an offense's own nature, its own strengths and weaknesses, more than it is decided by the opposing reactors, the defense. Put simply, it is the job of the defense to capitalize on the offense's nature, because again, for the last time, everything starts with offense. And I could do a semantical argument all day on that if need be. So that's statement number one. Let's hope I haven't lost you. Statement number two here then, it feeds off a part of statement number one, a take given within statement number one. The idea that offensive mistakes, mistakes that are a byproduct of offensive deficiencies, are what cause teams to lose football games. Statement number two. No unit has more influence over the cumulative number of negative plays, mistakes, made in a football game than the offensive line. That is my next point. This one may sound a bit spicy too, seeing as it is the quarterback, not the offensive line, who actually commands where a football may go on any given play. I mean, after the football is put in play by a team's center, it is almost always, barring Wildcat, the quarterback who is going to get the football next. But here's why I think offensive line matters more. Perhaps you've heard this saying before. 3 things can happen when you throw the football, and 2 of them are bad. Incompletions and interceptions, of course, is what that's referring to, as opposed to completions. It's a good statement, it's funny, it's an old head thing to say, and that could make it even better if I wanted to. 4 things can happen when you attempt to throw the football, because attempts, now we're including plays that end in sacks. We can add scrambles in here too, sure, if we're just doing pass attempts using that metric so as not to be bad faith. But even still, that's 3 bad outcomes to 2 good ones. Now, the point I'm making here, it's not as simple as that. That would be flawed logic, but it is semi-related. And it does start with the fact that when you run the football, the outcome options are binary. 50-50 split. You're either gaining yards or you're losing them. Anthony, what about fumbles? Well, receivers can fumble too, so I don't really want to hear that. Again, that's not the point though. The point here is whether or not you choose to run or pass on a given play in football, there will always be an answer somewhere. 2 forms of answers, a pre-snap one and a post-snap one. There's always going to be something somewhere because, like I said, defense is really hard. There is a lot of football field in a football game. It is on the quarterback, the play caller, and the center then to identify whatever answer may be easiest before the football is snapped. Are you running into a light box? Are you passing against a heavy box? Are you prepared to handle pressure combinations that a defense may send? Can you see the mismatch on the field, wherever that may be? That is pre-snap. That is what going through potential pre-snap answers looks like. Post-snap, though, once you have picked the correct theoretical answer, now you have to act. You either have to actually block the run that you have called correctly, or you have to actually throw the ball to the correct place on the field. You know how I said that mistakes lose football games? Well, we've got evidence to back this. The turnover battle has, historically, told the story of football wins and losses better than just about any other metric. Sacks also have this influence. More on that in a second. Negative plays are bad. I mean, that's really not a revelation. Well, in the run game, the number one cause of a negative run play is a blocking failure. A failure to execute, a miscommunication, right? That's on the offensive line. And in the passing game, well, yeah, interceptions, sacks, and incompletions, they are caused by the quarterback. But let me ask you this. I'm going to call this the Mac Jones phenomenon. Why doesn't an NFL quarterback, someone with, no matter what, a good enough arm and a pretty good brain, just throw to an open receiver every time? We know that even the worst quarterbacks in the NFL are capable of this to some extent. I mean, rookie year Mac Jones, he had a pretty solid season with a pretty weak receiving corps. If you're careful enough and sound enough, someone's got to pop open somewhere eventually. No? Well, the answer,
Reason, not answer.
as we know intuitively that this does not work in the long run, it's because these guys are in a rush. They don't have very long to throw the football. On average, quarterbacks need to release the ball somewhere in between 3 and 5 seconds at most. And offensive coordinators, they have to account for this, which means that all NFL quarterbacks know intuitively they've got about 3 Mississippi to search for their in-structure answers that they identified pre-snap as likely correct to work. And all NFL quarterbacks have been coached to know intuitively that if they don't know what they're looking at, they should either take off and run or throw the football away or throw to a check down. And so, if we're talking sheer volume here, the primary cause of negative plays at the NFL level in 2024, it's not dumb quarterback throws. These guys are too good for that. They're too well coached for that. They have too much intuition for that. The primary cause of negative plays at the NFL level in 2024 is poor pass protection, which is an offensive line problem. Sacks. The most intercepted quarterback in football, for example, threw picks at most about a 4% rate last season. That's once in every 25 dropbacks. The most sacked quarterbacks, though, well, that happened once in every 10 dropbacks. And we have proof regarding how harmful individual sacks are. If you want to say that interceptions are drastically more damaging, they're really not. Oh, and did I mention that a lot of interceptions tend to be caused by quick pressure as well? Mac Jones, again, he was a different player entirely once his protection tiered down. Negative pass plays in football are primarily caused by poor pass protection relative to the amount of time necessary for a play and its answers to unfold. Mouthful, I'm sorry. That is where I stand here, though. If the quarterback can comfortably hold the football for a long time in search of answers, they will. And the offense will be better for it. Just look at Jalen Hurts. I mean, one of the longest time to throws in football last year, the longest actually, and it sure looks like that worked out, at least to me. Oh, and sticking with the Eagles here, I think we should remind ourselves that wherever you stand in relation to the blame game on negative passing plays in the NFL, passing is generally avoided altogether when it can be, because runs are safer. If you can't stop the run in football, no smart team is going to stop running. It is first in the hierarchy. Bill Belichick, for example, the greatest defensive mind that the game has ever seen, before football games, he used to go up to his defensive coordinator and ask, "What is our plan this week to stop the run?" They would give him an answer, and guess what he'd respond with? "If that doesn't work, what is your next plan to stop the run?" That's what I'm talking about here. No unit dictates the number of mistakes made in a football game and the type of those mistakes more than the offensive line. That is statement two concluded. Statement number three here is a brief one. I've probably worn you out after the last two. In fact, statement number three, it's a take I didn't even come up with. Jim Harbaugh did. Statement three, the offensive line is the only unit in football that depends on nobody else for its own success. A perfect pass isn't perfect if it's dropped, right? A perfect route isn't successful if the ball isn't accurate. A perfect pass rush isn't perfect if the quarterback gets the ball out by the time you arrive. And perfect coverage, well, that's not perfect if the receiver gets open after 8 seconds. And perfect run defense, I mean, that's not perfect unless, in many cases, all three levels of your defense execute their assignments. Perfect run blocking, though. I mean, sure, I guess it's possible to have like the Antichrist at running back, the worst running back ever, who just turns around, runs backward, and nukes this Harbaugh logic. But surely you can understand my argument here that trench dominance on the offensive end is at least the least dependent on another position group. I mean, my grandma could probably gain 2, 3 yards behind the greatest offensive line on the greatest run block ever assembled. I'm not sure about any other positions assignments, though, and what my grandma could and couldn't do. So I guess that's how we'll tweak this one from Harbaugh. The offensive line is the unit in football that is the least dependent on other units to experience success. That is statement three. Now, those past three statements, I'd say that they all speak to the importance of investing in offensive line talent, right? The actual players here. You want this unit to be as dominant as possible and as well rounded as possible, and also consistent, right? Healthy, so as to avoid negative plays and to create your own positive plays as much as possible. Statements one through three speak to that. Statements four and five here, though, they're going to speak to the importance of offensive line coaching. Because in many ways, a line is only as good as its coach, and that's really important to acknowledge too. Statement number four, the offensive line is the most malleable unit on a football team. Brandon Thorne of the Trench Warfare Substack is one of the most knowledgeable minds covering the game of football today. Few people on this planet have a deeper, more nuanced understanding of individual offensive linemen and overarching offensive protection plans, collective units, than Thorne. He really knows his stuff. You should check out his work. I highly recommend it. In the summer of 2024, Brandon Thorne projected the Washington Commanders to have the second worst offensive line in all of the NFL. He put them in a tier with one other team at the bottom of the league, the New England Patriots. The Commanders, though, went on to have one of the best rushing attacks in football last season. And I know what you're thinking. Of course, this had to do with Jaden Daniels. In no way am I saying that they would have been remotely this good without him back there. But one, even in games where Jaden Daniels did not play, Marcus Mariota games, and two, even on runs where Jaden Daniels was not running with the football, this offensive line and their execution of their assignments against their men on defense, it looked closer to a top of league line than a bottom 10 one. Certainly not bottom two. And that is not just my opinion. That was the opinion of a number of top football analysts on the season. Did this unit have its fair share of pass protection issues? Sure. Did this unit struggle as injuries began to take a toll? Absolutely. It was not deep, not at all. But this unit exceeded expectations in almost every way imaginable in 2024. And for as much credit as Jaden Daniels deserves in that equation, it would be a crime to disregard the roles that offensive line coach Bobby Johnson, run game coordinator Anthony Lynn, and of course, offensive coordinator, architect Cliff Kingsbury played in this equation. And if you think that Brandon Thorne was wrong in his evaluation, you're missing the point here. He is, generally speaking, about as correct as any analyst overall could be. He, even down to individual players on the Commanders' offensive line, didn't really suck at evaluating any of them. The Patriots, too, they did suck. So that other team that he projected to be down at the bottom, they were down at the bottom. But offensive line, like I said, it's really malleable. Sure, weaknesses matter quite a bit, and if you have a weak link, it's always going to be pretty hard to conceal that without quarterback help. But it's rare in this league to find offensive linemen with a glaring weakness who do not also have a work-withable strength, something that makes them useful. For the Commanders, it was their slashing physical guards and the angles that they could take in the ground game that made them so successful. For the Saints, another great example here, in their first 2 weeks of the season, remember those? It was their zone run scheme and their incredibly athletic bodies up front that led to some pretty shocking success. Trevor Penning, Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, these guys dominated some solid defenses with solid defensive minds on the other side, like, say, the Cowboys and Mike Zimmer, in spite of their bad preseason projections, which were really bad, because they played to the strengths of their players. Clint Kubiak and his outside zone scheme, it did that. I mean, if you ask me, the week 3 injuries to the New Orleans Saints offensive line, it's one of the more quietly tragic stories of last season that nobody discusses. They were a blast until they weren't, and that was not for no reason. That was because they started losing these guys with these strengths that they could play off of. What's more, to this point, offensive line sees more position rotation than any other spot on the football field, and that is, again, because of malleability. Useful players remaining useful. Some of the best offensive linemen in football, guys like Tristan Wirfs, Joe Tooney, Penei Sewell, they have extensive histories of lining up in a number of spots across the line of scrimmage depending on what their team may need in a given week or season. Offensive line rotations, they're really common. These guys, as individuals, are often prepared to make shifts, rotations, and jumps from the moment that they enter the NFL. And it is then the duty of a team's line coach or coaches to make that transition as smooth as possible. That is what separates a team like the Eagles, with success stories like Jordan Mailata, Jason Kelsey, Mekhi Becton, and his role on the team from this past year, from every other team in the league. It can be frustrating, but it's true. Not every team has this privilege, the privilege of having a great offensive line coach. A foreign guy, a small sixth rounder, and a clumsy giant to one organization are three of the best offensive linemen in football upon joining another. Coincidence? I think not. One more example I'll give, just because I really wanted to put this in somewhere. Dante Scarnecchia, formerly of the Patriots, is arguably the greatest offensive line coach in NFL history. I mean, he's absolutely up there. Scarnecchia was with New England from 2000 to 2013. A phenomenal run for the franchise, right? They won 3 Super Bowls and they made an additional 2, all of that. In 2014, Scarnecchia briefly retired and moved to a consulting role for the organization. In 2015, Tom Brady had perhaps the most miserable playoff game of his career. I think even he would tell you that, protection-wise, against the Denver Broncos in the conference championship in a game that he lost. In 2016, then, Scarnecchia rejoined the team, and they went on to appear in 3 consecutive Super Bowls. He retired again, and what followed again was one of the worst Tom Brady seasons that we've seen from him as a starter. The one that caused him to leave New England. Excluding a Mac Jones rookie year blip, since then, I mean, New England, they've been kind of in offensive line purgatory. And again, that's not for no reason. Every player, every offensive lineman in the sport of football has at least one strength. Every player is capable of playing a useful brand of football. And offensive line coaches, they are often, if not always, the difference here between potential and reality. And that leads me perfectly into point number 5, statement number 5, that offensive line coach is perhaps the most challenging role to excel at in the coaching world relative to the talent pool. There's a lot of good offensive coordinators out there. There's also a lot of good defensive coordinators. There's a lot of great head coaches too, and for as many great guys that there are at these spots currently, there always seems to be another batch on the rise as well. It's like the league grows innovators on trees. But great offensive line coaches, there really are not too many. And that, again, is not for no reason. See, I listened to a great segment of the Athletic Football Show, a podcast hosted by Robert Mays and Derek Klassen recently, in which the two were asked a very interesting question about this subject. Why are there so few difference-making offensive line coaches right now? You've got guys like Jeff Stoutland, Bill Callahan, Hank Fraley, Adam Stenovich. What are these coaches doing to set themselves apart, and why? I really liked Robert May's answer to this question, and in Jim Harbaugh fashion, I'll let him make my point here for efficiency's sake. As outlined by Mays, who relayed this question to about half a dozen head coaches and offensive coordinators out there, it really boils down to this. Offensive line, it's scheme and it's technique. If you're the offensive line coach, you're probably the run game coordinator for your team too, because you know what you're working with here. You know what types of runs would best suit your linemen. Then, after that, you have to teach individual technique to 5 different players, all playing 5 different positions. That's more starting players than in any other position group. And I mean, even say defensive backs, a DB's coach, they don't have to teach this level of cohesion. For what it's worth, I found this interesting. A number of Robert May's responders, they also said that too many coaches these days, too many offensive line coaches, they have too much of a focus on scheme and not enough on that technique that you need to teach. I also heard on a different podcast this same week, the Sumer Sports Show, which invited on Duke Manyweather of Offensive Line Masterminds, one of the smartest offensive line minds out there today. He said the exact same thing. Furthermore, one Robert Mays responder gave arguably the most insightful take of all here. They argued that the position has evolved over time from being a drill instructor, so to speak, to being more of a psychologist, it being more of a teaching oriented role. And you know, most people, they're just not equipped with that kind of mental flexibility, that dexterity. Again, thank you to Robert Mays for sourcing and making that point. Every man on your offensive line is different. You must connect to all of them, you must teach them individually, and then you must make it cohesive. And then you have to tackle both the run and the passing games. That's a lot of work. Oh, and did I mention that, as highlighted by both Derek Klassen and current offensive line prospect Will Campbell about 2 months before this, the margin of error at offensive line, it's brutally low. In Klassen's words, 2 mistakes a game, that's enough. Or as Campbell put it, more eloquently,
one thing we live by in the O-line room, a D lineman get 1 sack a game, and that's the only thing he can do. 12 games, he'll be a top 5 pick. You give up 1 sack a game for 12 games, you're going to work at Amazon. Nothing wrong with that, but whenever we're here, this is what we're striving for.
So there you have it. My 5 arguments as to why offensive line is the most important unit in football. The unit, then, that is deserving of more attention and investment than any other in the sport. How many teams in recent NFL history have made or almost made a Super Bowl with a non first round talent at quarterback? Perhaps even someone they traded for? It's kind of a shockingly high number, no? Especially when we're waiting our 6th round boys here. Apply that to offensive line though, and one final time, you will see the point that I'm making. To conclude here, there's something almost poetic to me about the most important position in the game of football being the most boring. I think I can safely, objectively say that, right? Even as someone who loves the offensive line, football is an entertaining game, and that is why we watch. We love the big time throws, we love incredible catches, we love long runs, and we love touchdowns. I love playing catch. I'm not going to go outside and do pass sets in my front yard, though. But the real game here, it is a game that's won in the margins. Football's a game of inches. In other words, you don't get the flat screen TV in the living room without first building the house. And you don't get the house without first building the foundation. I think this is something that we all know to be true, but it's often easy to forget and neglect, anyways. And that's one thing if you're a casual fan, but it's another entirely if you are a general manager wondering why the house keeps making that weird creaking noise. Sure, ignorance is bliss, but knowledge is power. And the most powerful teams in the history of football have always had this knowledge as an edge. So, yeah, the hot tub and the king sized bed, they are really nice, but draft season is right around the corner. And if your team happens to take a big guy in round 1, it wouldn't hurt to show him some love too, I think. Thanks for watching. Thank you for watching this week's video. I hope you enjoyed this one. One thing that you've probably gathered I like to do is relearn things, right? Take things that are kind of intuitive, things that we believe at face value, like eyesight matters in sports or the offensive line is important, and really just stretch them out, flesh them out, poke holes in these things, see why we believe what we do. I think that this relearning process, this reinvestigation process, it's a great way to feel firm and confident in your beliefs. And if you can't back up or substantiate the things that you believe, maybe you shouldn't believe them. I hope you come back next week for whatever video I've got planned next, and I hope you leave something in the comments. Any critiques are welcome. You can always email me. You can follow me on TikTok as well. You can find me on Twitter as well. Thank you so much, and see you soon.